Everyone, and welcome to our AgEd for All webinar. Today, we are so glad that you were able to join us. This is our fifth AgEd for All learning session hosted by NAAE and the National FFA as part of our commitment to making our organizations welcoming and safe places where all are celebrated as their true and authentic selves. I'm Andrea Fristow, Program Manager at NAAE, and I'll be helping to facilitate today's conversation. The structured session today will last about 1 hour, followed up with 30 minutes of follow-up Q&A if needed. The session will be recorded, so you'll be able to go to the NAAE website and find today's session there. Professional development certificates will be emailed to all the attendees using the email address that you registered with. And we encourage any questions, either using the chat. Sarah and I will both be looking for questions there, or you can unmute and ask verbally if you'd like to do it that way. We hope that you're here today to learn and grow as an educator. This session and all sessions are about sharing and being open to exploring ideas and concepts, so we may all be more empathetic, aware, inclusive, and accepting. And this is a judgment-free zone where respectful dialogue is encouraged. That's the way we grow and learn as professionals. So today we are going over microaggression and micro-messaging with Dr. Roger Cleveland and Dr. Laurie Wright. This session will help our participants understand the concepts of microaggressions, micro-inequities, and stereotype threat, and how these can manifest and how they impact learning environments. And we'll introduce you to ways of challenging unconscious biases, and we'll also explore and share out strategies to effectively respond to microaggressions. We have with us Dr. Roger Cleveland and Dr. Laurie Wright. They both have been with us for several of these webinars. Dr. Cleveland has been at the forefront of equity and inclusion for over a decade. He is widely sought for his expertise in cultural proficiency, instructional equity, implicit bias, closing achievement gaps, learning styles, transforming school culture, conducting culture audits, and school improvement planning. He has taught at Morehead State University, the University of Kentucky, Middle Tennessee State University, and Eastern Kentucky University, and is currently a professor in the School of Education at Kentucky State University, and serves as the director of the Center for Research on the Eradication of Educational Disparities. In 2014, he was inducted into the Kentucky Civil Rights Hall of Fame, and he is currently the president and owner of Millennium Learning Concepts Consulting Company. And Dr. Wright is an accomplished higher education professional who is committed to principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion. She has extensive experience in designing and conducting campus climate assessments, conducting institutional and organizational cultural and equity desk audits, assisting organizations and institutions develop DEI plans, and training for faculty, staff, and other key internal and external stakeholders. And she currently serves as the director for TRIO Student Support Services at Northern Kentucky University. So thank you all for coming, and Dr. Cleveland and Dr. Wright, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, thank you. I
Thank you.
appreciate your introduction. So we're going to jump right to it. We have quite a bit of content to share. I just want to tell you now, we're not going to go through every single slide. Part of the information in the presentation is our resources, and so we're going to jump around a little bit to make sure we cover the primary areas, and then we're also going to want to leave some time for some Q&A and things of that nature. So I'm going to share my screen real quick, and so we can get started. And feel free to, as Sarah said, put questions in the chat or comments. I'll throw a few questions out there every now and then, and you can just respond either unmuting or just put in the chat. So we're going to talk about microaggressions and micro-messaging, and talk a little bit about stereotype threat also. I'm starting to think, you know, I'm getting used to Daniel. I've seen Daniel quite a few times on these sessions. I'm gonna start making him do some of these trainings with me. So what we're going to cover today is when we finish, hopefully you will be able to have a good understanding of microaggressions, micro messages, and stereotype threat. Be able to describe key elements of microaggression and micro messaging, and then assess the impact microaggressions and micro messages have in schools. And so that's what we're going to try to reach. As we said, we're going to share the PowerPoint so you don't have to take copious notes. So let's talk about microaggressions for a minute, what they are, things like that. It can be defined as a brief and commonplace daily verbal and behavioral environmental indignities, whether intentional or unintentional, and which communicate hostile, derogatory, and negative slights and invalidations and insults. And a while back, maybe I guess last week, we had something on implicit biases with Jamie Nebbit, and then I've done some things on implicit biases also for NAAE and FFA. And the unique difference between microaggressions, particularly racial microaggressions, that many times is not implicit. People have understanding of what they're doing. Sometimes they're unintentional, but a lot of times they are intentional. And also individual or group because they're marginalized in status. So these are geared towards folks who are marginalized in our society. And so that's a quick down and dirty definition of that. And there's a good book, and you're gonna hear from him in a video in a second. Dr. Sue, who is one of the leading researchers on microaggressions. And this is a good book to grab if you want to get more information about microaggressions, but we're going to see a video about that in a second, right here.
Good day, everyone. My name is Daryl Wingsu, and I am a professor of psychology and education at Teachers College, Columbia University. I am also author of Microaggressions in Everyday Life and Microaggressions and Marginality. Today, I would like to share with you some of the harmful impact that microaggressions have on marginalized groups in our society. But what are microaggressions? Well, microaggressions are the everyday slights, indignities, put-downs, and insults that people of color, women, LGBT populations, or those who are marginalized experience in their day-to-day interactions with people. Microaggressions oftentimes appear to be a compliment, but contain a meta-communication or a hidden insult to the target groups in which it is delivered. People who engage in microaggressions are ordinary folks who experience themselves as good, moral, decent individuals. Microaggressions occur because they are outside the level of conscious awareness of the perpetrator. In this scene, Michael, an Asian American graduate student, is receiving academic counseling from his sponsor. They have a pleasant conversation. At the end of their meeting, the advisor delivers what he believes to be a compliment to Michael by stating, quote, "You know you speak excellent English," end quote. Michael is disturbed because it seems to imply that he is not a true American and that he is a perpetual alien in his own country. Microaggressions can also be delivered non-verbally through unconscious behaviors or gestures. In this scene, Jenny has finished a late night at the office and awaits the elevator. As the door opens, she takes one step forward, sees a black male rider, hesitates, and immediately clutches her purse and places her hand over her necklace. The hidden communication is that African Americans are prone to crime, will break the law, are up to no good, and will steal. Gender microaggressions occur also frequently to women. In this scene, Laura, a female manager, sits with her male colleagues in a meeting with the president. Note that the men tend to talk to one another, cut her off in mid-sentence, and that the president addresses only the males in the group. When Laura attempts to contribute to the discussion, she is oftentimes ignored. In one case, a male colleague checks his phone rather than listen. What can each and every one of us do to combat microaggressions? We need to realize that microaggressions are unconscious manifestations of a worldview of inclusion, exclusion, superiority, inferiority. Thus, our major task is to make the invisible visible. There are, in essence, 5 things that we need to do individually. First, learn from constant vigilance of your own biases and fears. Second, experiential reality is important in interacting with people who differ from you in terms of race, culture, ethnicity. Thirdly, don't be defensive. Fourthly, be open to discussing your own attitudes and biases and how they might have hurt others or in some sense revealed bias on your part. Lastly, it is very important to be an ally. Stand personally against all forms of bias and discrimination. I wrote 2 books, Microaggressions in Everyday Life and Microaggressions and Marginality, to help us combat microaggressions at the individual, institutional, and societal level. If we are to become a fair, just, and humane society, I hope each and every one of you will join me in this important journey. Thank you.
Okay, so let's look at some categories of racial microaggressions that people may experience in the workplace and in schools. The first one is micro insult, often unconscious. These are behaviors or verbal remarks or comments that convey rudeness, insensitivity, demean a person's racial heritage or identity. Micro invalidation. You see a lot of these in conversations. These are verbal comments or behaviors that exclude, negate, or nullify the psychological thoughts, feelings, or experiential reality of a person of color. And then these are sometimes conscious micro assaults. Explicit racial derogations are characterized primarily by a violent verbal and nonverbal attack meant to hurt the intended victim through name calling, avoidant behavior, purposeful discriminatory actions. And throughout the last 2 or 3 or 4 months, you've probably seen all 3 of these either through the media, either social media at some point in time, micro insults, micro assaults, or micro invalidations. But usually a lot of times in school settings, it's more micro invalidations that are more relevant, conscious and things of that nature in schools. So, and there's I have a video I'm gonna show in a second it has a piece of humor to it, but it has a lot of reality to it that talks about racial microaggressions and people who are marginalized experience those. And it has a good message behind it. Before we get to that, some examples of racial microaggressions there are the themes, microaggressions, and then the message. So a theme is you're alien in your own land when Asian Americans and Latino Americans are assumed to be foreign born. So you hear people say, where are you from? Where were you born? You speak English, and they're from Detroit, Michigan, and they're asking them where they're from. And the message behind that is you're not American, you are a foreigner. Or another ascription to intelligence, assign intelligence to a person of color based on their race. You are accredited your race, you're so articulate. I hear that quite a bit. I'm speaking somewhere and people will say, you're so articulate, as if, NAAE or FFA would hire me to come speak at a conference and I can't put 2 sentences together. And so I get that, oh, you're so articulate. And then the message behind that is people of color are generally not as intelligent as whites. It is usual for someone of a race to be unusual for someone to be race to be intelligent. All Asians are intelligent and good at math and sciences. And then we have one where often is colorblindness. Statements indicate that a white person does not want to acknowledge race. When I look at you, I don't see color. And I want to stop right there and just get a response in the chat, or somebody unmute their mic and just tell me what's wrong with that comment there. When I look at you, I don't see color. Someone share their thoughts about that.
You're acknowledging color by just saying the statement that you don't.
That you don't? Okay. Thanks, Dalton. Anyone else?
I would think that it truly meant that they did see the color and they noticed it was different. And so they were just trying to say that they don't care.
Okay. So I'm almost invisible, right? The Invisible Man or Ralph Ellison. I'm only invisible because people don't see me. Yeah, someone else.
You're almost invalidating some of their struggles that people of color can feel or have because of their color. So you're kind of telling them that their struggles don't exist from those biases that are there.
Exactly. And that's one of the things is micro-invalidation. And also you could easily say, it's almost like saying that if you are in a crowded room, you're in a conference or any kind of conversation, and you don't acknowledge that you don't acknowledge women's the gender, and so not acknowledging gender, you're saying that they have no experiences of sexism and things of that nature, or a woman's experience in this country. And so it's the same thing as saying I don't see color, I also don't see gender and things of that nature. Before I move on, any comments, Laurie? You want to chime in?
I mean, I just think, this week is a perfect example with the announcement of Kamala Harris's run for the vice presidency. And, just this whole, all kinds of micro assaults and invalidations. And, you almost were kind of, I remember on Twitter, as the announcement was made, it was tempered by a lot of Black women, especially saying, uh-oh, we better brace ourselves. Here comes the onslaughts of attacks about our gender, about our qualifications, you name it. We're about to go through this season of just kind of all out assault on the integrity, right, of Black women. And so, was just kind of thinking and reading some of the things that were said, and and I think we've captured it here, this whole notion of color blindness or words that invalidate. And I think a lot of times, there may be some levels of unconsciousness, but then also there are oftentimes where it's very intentional. The whole adage around sticks and stones, we know is not true, and folks can really use words to assault and demean other people. So, we don't really have to look too far, to really kind of see how this is playing out on more of a national scale, right? But, I think it very much points back to this whole notion of our implicit biases in the way that we just, operate, and who we give a lens and a voice to, right? Who we center, whose experiences we center in our everyday lives.
Okay, and in the chat and some of y'all's comments, I just want to go back a second and just, those are, a couple of you all mentioned this, micro insults, micro assault, but mostly micro invalidation, that some of you all mentioned, and also whether it's women or people of color, it could be a number of different people and their experiences. It says racial microaggressions, but it's usually people who are marginalized in this country, so it could go beyond race. And so I want to show you this video. I think it's from MTV. Like I said, it has it reaches at humor, but there's a really serious message behind it. And after I show you the video, I want you to tell me if you ever heard some of those things that were mentioned in the video.
So you're not good at golf, but you're white. People of color have to deal with racial microaggressions every single day. So microaggressions are those little unintentional insults that basically see people of color as stereotypes, which got me thinking, what if white people had to deal with racial microaggressions?
So like, where are you from? No, like, where are you really from?
Why don't you have an accent? Like a Swedish accent.
Your English is really, really good. It's like I can't even tell you have an accent or anything.
I don't have an accent.
No, that's what I'm saying. You don't speak Gaelic?
You don't speak German?
Can you say a curse word in European?
What does that even mean?
Hey, Connor, you know about NASCAR stuff, right? Can you take a look at this?
Can you teach me how to line dance?
Play the banjo.
Act entitled in the supermarket. Love white food. No real flavor to it. Never an upset tummy.
You're so exotic.
How do you get your hair like that? I love how it's so limp.
Ew, why does it feel like that?
Oh my God, so it just does that? No, you are really pretty for a white girl.
Your eyes are so round, like this.
You know who you look like? Kenny Chesney.
Zach Braff.
Emma Stone.
Rachel Maddow.
My friend Chad. Maybe you know him. He's white too.
No, Emma Watson.
Not Macklemore. What's the other guy?
Oh, is it Emma Thompson?
It's CHAD, like Chad.
One of the Emmas. You look like an Emma.
You know who you look like? I bet you hear this all the time. Jeffrey Dahmer.
How does it feel to be the token white guy in the office?
Hey, Connor, can we get a white perspective on this?
I love everything about white culture. You guys are like so fun.
What do you mean you don't listen to Creed? You're white.
You've never tried meth. But you're white.
You don't act like a normal white person.
You're not really white, though.
You're not really white.
I'm whiter than you are.
So, did all your ancestors own slaves?
No, but of course he wishes that he could still own slaves. That's a part of his culture.
Bryce, back me up on this one. The thing you have to understand about white culture
No, I
is
went
that
to
white
an
people are...
historically white college, so I
Okay,
know about
I
white culture.
backpacked
There
in
was
Europe.
So can you say how ridiculous this was? I know. Story of my life. If you've ever experienced microaggressions because of your race, gender, sexuality, or body type, go ahead and vent about it in the comments.
Can you teach me how to like take a really popular rap song and like make it a ukulele song? It's so cool. I think it's so cool how you guys do that.
Okay, enough of that. So, have you all heard any of those comments in schools or different places? What's your response to that? The different comments.
Someone said every day, I didn't recognize you with the new hair is one I've heard. Any other?
Any comments? You can unmute the mic if you like.
I'm sorry, the comment about but I went backpacking in Europe just is hilarious because I feel like you do hear that all the time. Oh, I've been to that country or this country, as if you know everything. I really thought that was funny.
So I'm biracial, and I've heard my favorite one was, do you know Chad? He's black. You should know him, right? Heard that so many times. In my school and in my family.
On my last, at my last university, I was expected to know every black professor on campus. I have no idea who they were, but since I was black, I should know the rest of them also. And I knew some of them, but you know, that's like asking if Daniel taught at, you know, UCLA, he should know every white professor there. You know, it was ridiculous, you know, or every man there, or every woman there. But, you know, they just did it in a way that was, you know, sort of humorous, but there's a message behind those around the microaggressions, things like that. Anyone else? One more comment before Laurie talks about micro messaging.
And I did read something in someone, okay, it says it gets old quick if you hear it every day, right? So the video was kind of, I wouldn't even say an extreme. Right? I mean, it was, I think, you know, I can relate, and it was humorous while we watched it, but you're absolutely right. If this is happening every day in every space, not just, you know, academically, but out in the community and the stores, you know, yes, it can get old really quickly. And okay, and sex is microaggressions. It's nice to see a woman in a hardware store. Right.
And the microaggressions are like, it's called micro because they're small. So you hear these things like all day long, you know, and about 3:30, and let's say they're sexist microaggressions, and all day long, Mia's been hearing all these little comments, you know, and then somebody walks up to her, and, you know, at 3:30 and says something, and she just loses it. Well, they don't know she's been hearing these things, these small things. So this micro turns into a macro. And then, you know, she's overreacting. You know, she's so emotional as a woman. Why is she acting like this? Well, they don't realize that she's been hearing these things throughout the day, or throughout the week. And it at some point in time, it just boils over. I think someone else put something in the chat real quick.
Yeah, Mia said, I had a school board member ask why my OC team didn't have any boys on it.
Okay.
Yeah, microaggressions are often disguised as compliments. Yeah, kind of the backhanded compliment kind of thing.
Exactly. Laurie, micro messaging.
All righty. So, you know, when we're doing, you know, whether it's a micro or whether it's happening at a macro level, all of these messages are being communicated to the receiver from the one who's saying it, and it all, you know, they all mean something. So Roger, if you can advance your screen.
Mhm.
Go up a little. All right, so the definition of micro-messaging. Micro-messages are those small, subtle, universally understood messages that we send and receive through words, gestures, body language, tone of voice, and facial expressions whenever we interact with others. And there are three important things to know about micro-messages: that they can be positive or negative. They are often semi-conscious or unconscious, except for the micro assaults, which are, very much on a conscious level. And they have a greater impact on the performance of underrepresented populations, particularly in schools, i.e. students with disabilities, socioeconomically disadvantaged, limited English proficient, and non-traditional by gender, etc. Right, so these small subtle messages are going out all the time. So the micro-inequities, there are two types of micro-messaging. The one, positive micro-messages or micro-affirmations that we send that recognize and validate others in positive, supportive ways. They cause people to feel valued, included, motivated, confident, and encouraged. The micro-inequities, however, are the negative micro messages. And those are the ones that we send that single out, overlook, ignore, or discount others, usually based on unchangeable characteristics such as ethnicity, gender, disability, etc. And I think we saw a little bit of that in the video, right? And this whole notion that it then, it makes people invisible. It's the perpetual I don't see color kind of thing that message that goes out, or, oh, wow, you do speak good English. How long have you been in the country? Or this whole mantra that I hear a lot or see a lot on, on television and on videos. Go back to where you came from. Go back to your country. Why are you speaking Spanish? You're in America. We speak English here, right? Some of those things.
All right. Let's check this out.
This is what they call me in school. I was sent home because of how my hair looks.
Had a teacher cut my hair off for playing with my braids. Thrown to the floor for sitting at my desk.
Black girls are suspended 5 times more than white girls, but they don't commit more serious offenses.
Why is this happening?
I'm strong. I'm sensitive.
I'm powerful.
I'm smart. I'm a leader.
So what were some of the micro messages or microaggressions that you heard in that video? I know it's pretty quick, but did you see or hear any microaggressions or micro messages in that video?
Okay, I see a couple pop up. Black girls are loud or rude. Their hair was wrong, right? Cutting hair or commenting on hair at all. Absolutely. From Daniel, natural hair issues. Anything else?
Anyone want to make a comment? You can unmute your mic if you feel you like to.
Make their way back, slowly but surely. I feel like at a conference when you're out on break, right? You gotta, come back from break.
Yeah. Well, I'll share my screen in a second when we get everyone back. I think we're about there. Okay. All right. Can you see that, Laurie?
Yes.
All right. So.
All righty. So in our breakout rooms, we were asked to kind of discuss, and we know we didn't have enough time, but we had some good ones in our group. Think of a time when you've received a microaggression, when you've been on the receiving end. With your group, if comfortable, describe how it made you feel at that moment. Explain any long-term effects. So if we, want to have a couple of folks that want to share out, you're welcome to put your comments in the chat, or you can also unmute your microphones and share out. Love to hear from you.
I can go ahead and share. One of the things we ended in the breakout session was the interview for my first teaching position, and how they congratulated me on being engaged, and that they were happy that I was settling down and getting married, because it made them feel more comfortable hiring me as a teacher compared to the previous experience they had. So that was kind of, as a woman and just starting with teaching, I was naive enough that I didn't know that that was completely illegal and wrong, but that was kind of the last comment I had ended with the breakout room.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that was quite the microaggression, I would say. Anyone else? Thank you. Anyone else want to share out from your group?
I was also in the room with Julie, and we just kind of discussed just being a woman in agriculture in general, and especially if you're a mother, and how people perceive you, or like ask you to do things, or don't ask you because you have your family, and then it like makes you feel uncomfortable, because like, how do you prioritize your work versus your family balance? So I felt really good talking with the ladies that I was with, because, you know, we all kind of like had that experience, like being a woman in ag, and then adding the mom or wife or SO, you know, onto that plate. So, and I shared that, you know, when I was pregnant, my male administrators, they didn't know how to handle it, because, you know, I was like doing my ag and FFA, and then, you know, I'm like 7 months pregnant, and then I had 16 weeks of maternity leave, because my babies were preemies, and then when I came back, you know, they were just like, now what, right? So it was really uncomfortable at that time, and it still feels that way even today, and my kids are like, you know, almost 2.
All right. Please share in the chat also some of your experiences as we move forward.
And I think, you know, the whole point, and it was pointed out in that conversation, that, right, we can probably recall, even if we think about it from when we were children or, you know, young adults, that those microaggressions and those messages oftentimes have long-term impact, and they do stay with us, and we can very easily recall them when we're asked. So that goes to kind of the long-term effects of that messaging and how we internalize that.
And here are 6 key elements around micro messaging. And the verbal part is what is said and how it's said. You know, you know, it's one of my hangups, but how the tone people use and how they say things, you know, it affects me sometimes. People's body language, how things are taken out of context or in context is a big one. What is not said or done, omission. And that could be a micro message and a microaggression. You're at work and you're on a committee and you send all the assignments out and leave someone off the email. You know, 3 days later, everybody's coming to report, give an update on their assignments, and you're looking like, what assignment? You know, and you know, people omit certain things purposely, and those are all micro messages. Praise and criticism, all those are different types of ways that micro messaging plays out in the workplace and in schools and in other places. Thoughts, Laurie, as we go into the next piece?
No, I mean, I think I'm very big on the nonverbal, and I'm a very big tone policer. And just really in the sense of, you know, especially in our, you know, in our office and, you know, with students with disabilities and other folks, just conversations and helping people understand it's the unsaid things, it's the intimated, you know, kind of, we know what you meant when you said that. So really helping folks understand that the contextual messages and clues, and also what you don't say speaks volumes, is just as powerful as the things that you do say and how you say them. So, you know, absolutely. Micro messaging is communicated, you know, praise and criticism is a big one. It can really be cloaked, right, in some praise, or what we call passive aggressive. I think that's another term for micro messaging, right? Okay.
I was just looking at the chat.
Yeah.
Jason had an interesting post also in the chat. You all get a chance to check it out. All right. Where it matters in schools, the micro messaging, and then the intent and the impact. Like I said, these things are very small, seem insignificant behaviors, but if you're constantly hearing these things over and over again, you can only imagine the effect it will have on a student and then their performance, particularly if it's a negative micro message that's going on and on and on.
Right.
Even the nonverbal, where you're in the classroom, you never call on a student, rarely ever say something to that student, or you're sending a message, even as nonverbal, and a micro message that something's going on with that student. And, you know, first thing the student will say is, teacher doesn't like me.
Right.
And they pick those things up.
Absolutely. So
go ahead.
No, I was going to read that. Why it matters. The renowned economist Mary Rowe, who conducted extensive research on underrepresentation at MIT, describes micro-inequities as small events that occur whenever people are perceived as different, that when accumulated over time can damage an individual's self-esteem and performance in the classroom. And I just remember when my daughter was in kindergarten, that she would get notes sent home all the time that her nickname that the teacher gave her was Bossy Flossie, because she would ask a lot of questions. But my daughter has a processing disorder, cognitive processing disorder, and that was the only way that she could make sense of the information. But over time, it just silenced her, right? I mean, because the message was, you're not important, you ask too many questions, you're disrupting what I have planned, sit over there, be quiet, you know, those kinds of things. And so, you know, over time, over the span of that kindergarten experience, she was profoundly changed in the way that she interacted. And there was a period of detachment there, you know, with school, that school wasn't fun. She didn't like to go to school. So, you know, that education piece is an important, the things that we say as educators to our students or don't say.
I meant to put it in this PowerPoint, but speaking of micro messaging, during the back in the day of Hurricane Katrina, there's two newspaper reports, and it had one picture of an African-American male and female with bags of stuff in their hands, and the caption said, two people looting during Hurricane Katrina. And then the next picture is a white male and white female, and it says, two hurricane survivors who found food during the hurricane. Now they both have stuff in their hands, but one was looting and the other one found the food. You find food and water or whatever, but the message, you know, what was the message behind that in that same newspaper? All right, we got to move on, you all. We got to keep it moving. All right. So here's some things that it looks like micro-inequities look like in schools. Chronically mispronouncing student's name, tolerate calling answers from some students but not others, discipline boys certainly more than girls, or that may be gender, or it could be an issue of race, or it could be an issue of socioeconomic status, avoid contact with select students, side when a student gets a wrong answer. All these are small messages, okay, that can impact the climate of a classroom. Does anyone else have something you want to add to this list? That could be a micro message or micro inequity in the schools, in the classroom. Either through
grouping. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. Absolutely. Who you put together, who you make sit alone and apart, who, you know, how do you signal belonging in those that don't belong? Good one, Mia. Any other ones? That was a good one.
And you can unmute your mic also if you want to speak to it.
Oh, student helpers. How often you send a student outside for a talk? And ooh, you're gonna get in trouble. Yeah, you keep signaling. That's a very strong message.
Exactly.
Not calling on some students, yes. Why often calling on the same students over and over again?
And if you call on the students, the same students all the time, and you know they're going to answer the question correctly, that takes the pressure off you to have to teach. You know what I'm saying? So you don't have to worry about, I'm going to call this one over here that knows the answer. So,
right.
I don't have to worry about that other stuff. In case they ask me a question I don't know how to respond to.
Giving them nicknames to avoid pronouncing their real names. Oh, that's a good one, right? That you're going to decide what you're comfortable in saying. And if you feel that the name is too difficult, you're just going to call them whatever you want to call them because, I can't pronounce your name. That's too hard. So how about I call you, whatever.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's power also. In the classroom also. Good job.
Yeah, those are good ones.
And here are some micro affirmations things that we can do. And the fourth bullet, we gotta be careful about that celebrating backgrounds and cultures for all students, which is great, but make sure we don't do a stereotypical way of doing that. Affirm students' effort, all those things, affirmations for students in the classroom. And I'm sure you all have other strategies also.
And so
go ahead.
There was a question, can you provide some examples of how to do number 4 well, so the cultural celebrations? And again, I work in higher ed, but I just remember when it was it was Hispanic Heritage Month, and this whole notion of, seeing sombreros everywhere and, there will, let's get a mariachi band and, all of these kind of stereotypical, but if you think of the full range of the Latinx, the Latino expression and culture, it was more than just the stereotypical, let's have a taco night and then we can have like a mariachi band and we can have, sombreros. It was like, no, that's just a little bit too much. And it really involved doing some research, right? Right. And then and what we did is we asked the students, how do you want to celebrate your culture?
Exactly.
And right. And I think Mia said that so that's what ended up happening was, we're not going to go with what's typically been done, how would you like to? And it ended up being a wonderful food fest and, dress and experiences. It was just very different. Right. As Jason said, tokenizing, that's the thing that you want to really, as much as possible, try to, and if the media or if you see all of those images portrayed a lot, those are probably not the images that you want to necessarily uplift for celebrating the cultures of all students.
And I think the biggest one is also to do voice and choice, ask students how they want to celebrate it. Also bring people from the community to share history and culture, but not necessarily going on what we think we know.
Right, and Jason said, and I love this one, don't expect students to be the voices for their culture / background, especially if they're the only student who identifies with that culture or background. And that's definitely when you can get into some really uncomfortable places around tokenizing, if they're the only one and you ask them to speak for the whole, range of experiences.
Exactly, yeah. But you also want them to have, choice, but that's their opinion how it may run, but another person, maybe from the same ethnic group, may not have the same opinion or thoughts about that.
Right.
And you don't want to put that pressure on that one particular student. But you can get students' voice, how they may perceive it. It may not be the exact same thing just because they're all in the same group. Okay, some things that you can consider. Know what your students bring to the classroom. That's funds of knowledge. Funds of knowledge is what students bring to the classroom from their homes and communities. They bring a knowledge base to the classroom, so we have to recognize that and we build on that. Be aware of the messages that we are sending, the micro messages. make your classroom culture responsive. And doing that, we have talked about that a little bit. Actually, talking about that next week. So stay tuned. And, you know, I like the idea of planning or embedding microaffirmations in your daily lessons, and you can build those things in there. And I have some, if you want to email me, I have some examples like that of building culture responsive lesson plans with affirmations in that. So you can just email me and ask for that, or I can send it to Sarah or Ellen and get it to you all. And doing what we're doing today, have an opportunity, a conversation about microaggressions and micro messaging are some things that we can do also. All right, before we get to the self, I want to talk about this just real quickly. How many of you all have heard of this term, stereotype threat? Either just respond through chat or
you can use the reaction
yeah.
button if you like.
Mm-hmm. How many of you have heard of this term?
Okay, so we got a raised hand. Someone said no. Have quite a few no's.
Okay.
Okay.
And this is important. This, a lot of this research comes from a guy named Claude Steele out of Stanford, and people have built on that research now. And you know what a stereotype is, but a stereotype threat is a perceived risk of confirming a negative stereotype threat. And so in Claude Steele's research, he found that African-American males, African-American students in general, stayed away from like the hard sciences majors and things like that because there's a stereotype about them that they would not do well at Stanford in those majors. So to make sure they didn't confirm that particular stereotype, they didn't even major in those areas. And so it's a stereotype threat that you may actually confirm that threat. So based on that definition, give me some other examples of that. Like, so African-Americans stayed away from hard sciences and things of that nature. What's another stereotype threat that another group, it don't have to be education, it could be anything, that people may stay away, they may confirm that. What are some thoughts?
Okay. We have women welding, men fashion design. Yeah, so in choices of majors and careers, what are, you know, typical male careers, female careers, all that. All righty. Courtney, I'm Jewish and I often think, am I tipping enough? I don't want to be the cheap Jew. Girls avoiding welding. Okay. Girls avoiding science. Right, minorities in agriculture. Yes.
Yeah. And so the stereotype, you know, they found is really real. And there's, like I said, there's a lot more research on it now. He did this in the 90s. But because of that stereotype threat, it can cause underperformance because you don't believe you can actually do well in that particular area. And also believe that you're judged unfairly. And most of this was research was done on college students. And so some is trickling down to like middle school and high school areas now also. So I want to give you an example of what that may look like in the classroom. So stereotype threat leads to underperformance. So you have students with high SAT math scores. And so you remind group A of gender before taking an exam. And you tell group B the exam has no gender biases, okay? And so when women underperform, women perform well. And so you told one group that, oh, nah, the exam has no gender bias. You didn't tell the other group that, and the results were just the message itself create a non-threat to those women that we said there was no gender bias. But the threat that it may be a bias and was not told to the other women, it impacted their performance. And basically what Claude Steele did with also in Stanford with the African-American students in doing that. So there's this term called wise criticism. It creates trust. Definition of wise criticism is criticism in which you explicitly tell the student that you think they are capable of attaining a high level of success and achievement, help students feel less defensive and less threatened. And the other part, on the other side of stereotype threat, is this whole thing called Impostor Phenomenon, and where you think that people may find out that you're not as smart as they perceive you to be, and so you keep from entering those areas also. And so you can just kind of write that one down. It's called Impostor Phenomenon. And you don't want to be outed as not as being as smart. You on scholarship, and then you're concerned that, you know, as you start going through classes and things like that, people are like, what are you doing on scholarship? And you're concerned that you may not perform at that level because you're on scholarship. It's called the Impostor Phenomenon. Who's heard of that term before?
Daniel just put something in the chat I wanted to capture. Or the ideology of soft bigotry of low expectations.
Yeah.
Right. What kind of expectations do we set for certain groups of students in our class? So it's not just the student in responding to the stereotype threat. Often as the educator, how are we perpetuating that through our own expectations and biases and again, micro messaging and things like that in the classroom. But we got a lot of no's. The imposter syndrome phenomenon was very big in our graduate program, in our doctoral program. And I think at certain points we all went through that, right? Do we really belong here? You know, because you hear so many messages about what groups are normally successful and who do you see in graduate programs and who don't. And then you feel like, well, if I'm one of the ones who made it, I don't want to be found out. Like, I don't want people thinking that I don't belong here. I did something to get here that was an unfair advantage. So.
And I was on a doctoral committee. The student just finished her doctorate a couple of years ago, and she did her research on imposter phenomenon on students actually in trio programs, Laurie. And she found out there was actually a lot of young women from rural areas of Kentucky who had internalized this imposter phenomenon thing because they came from rural Kentucky. They've heard so many times that people from rural Kentucky, Eastern Kentucky, Southeast Kentucky would not perform well. And so when they got into this program at the University of Kentucky, they were questioning themselves, should they be a Robinson Scholar and things of that nature? Should they be at a Research One university? So they questioned themselves. A lot of students left school prematurely because they didn't think they belonged, or they would be outed and somehow lose their scholarship and things like that. So there's recent research on that also. So.
Okay, and I think there was something in the chat. Okay. All right.
Okay, and then there's just another way of the responses. You get underserved praise, bad criticism, no feedback, and wise criticism. And, you know, life and death is in the power of the tongue. So it depends on how you respond to students, whether it's elementary, middle, high school, or college. That does have an effect on the feedback you give the students. And so being in education, professors try to model what we expect our teachers to do. So we try to make sure that our feedback is tied back to around wise criticism. That don't mean you don't hold students accountable, but you definitely don't want them to think that one exam is, it's it. And so we need to go back home.
Right.
And I felt that many times when I was in school, like, I'm really not supposed to be here, am I? And so you're in a multivariate statistics class and you only, black student in there, you're like, uh-oh, there's a wrong scheduling move.
Right.
and then a professor reminds you you're not supposed to be there also. And so whether that's race, gender, or whatever it may be, what are some groups of people that we haven't really talked about that may have experienced microaggressions or micro messaging or stereotype threat? I know we talked about race and gender, but what about socioeconomic status? What about sexual orientation and other areas how those groups may experience microaggressions or micro messaging? Anybody want to share their thoughts?
So we've got some, you can also unmute or share out. We have disability, non-native English speakers, people with disabilities again.
I see Leah Graves said, you're only here because affirmative action. Yeah. So they questioning why you're there. You can be there on your own merit.
How did you get here?
Yeah,
right?
we needed one more, so that's why you got
So
here.
you made the cut. Corey has disability, gender identity, religion, age. Yeah, people talking louder to someone who speaks a different language, right? I just never know. I never understood how, you know, that correlation of assuming that people were hard of hearing just because they spoke a different language.
Exactly.
Good. Okay. Good.
Okay, so I want you to do a selfie. This is your selfie, and then I want you all to share some of these out. So based on everything we talked about, from microaggressions to micro messaging, stereotype threat, some things we wasn't on here, we got to imposter phenomenon, all those things. Based on as a professional and knowing that these microaggressions, micro messages, stereotype things exist, what will you continue doing as a professional based on what you've heard and dealing with your students? What will you continue doing is the first one, how you want to finish that. You can do one of three just for the sake of time, or you can do all three. I will continue doing as a professional. I will start doing as a professional, and I will stop doing some things as it relates to microaggression, micro messaging, stereotype threat. Finish these sentences through your professional lens as an educator. I will continue doing, pick any one you want, and then we'll share out. I will start doing, I will stop doing.
Continue to pay attention to what I say and how I say things to other people. Okay, good.
I will continue doing, I will start doing, I will stop doing. And if a couple of people want to unmute their mics and just share out, that'd be great also. We have any takers? Leah, like you have something on your mind. You don't know?
I'd like to start doing more wise criticism and be really knowledgeable and like come up with different phrases, research different phrases that I could use more consistently to have that wise criticism focus instead of some of the other ones that I may be doing unintentionally and having a detrimental outcome for my students.
Great. Anyone else?
I would like to think about like the second layer of what something means. So not the most obvious statement, but if I think, okay, what's this kind of the underlying implication of that statement? I think that that would be helpful.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
I liked Christina Carey's post in the chat. I'll continue educating myself about the cultural backgrounds of students in my courses by asking questions and being curious.
All right, great.
That's a good one.
I think my thing is I'm going to try to do my best to stop being silent when I'm in a group setting where these microaggressions are happening, and I have the ability to stop them. I need to do that a little bit more and know how to do that effectively and make it a learning experience.
I think it's really important. In our breakout session, we were talking about that, and I asked my group, how do people respond when they hear microaggressions or micro messages in schools? And I think it's important because silence is consent. So if you don't say anything, you're basically telling students and other staff that that's okay. And so, but sometimes we need some talking points and ways to address it where they will actually listen. And so that's important also.
And I think Daryl Sue kind of made the point about becoming allies, right? But even shifting the conversation beyond just being an ally to almost a co-conspirator, right? You know, that allies, you sometimes get the opportunity to kind of stand and kind of the bystander, and you get to kind of pick and choose where you want to engage and how you want to engage, and you are interrogating, what do I have to lose if I engage a certain way? But this whole notion of co-conspirator or accomplice, right? You know, that, hey, I'm going to stand up, I'm going to use my power, I'm in a position to kind of interrupt, you know, harmful behaviors or conversations that are going on, and using where you do have positions where there's a power differential or influence, where you can help to change even policies or classroom culture, school cultures, if it's in the publications that you put out, if it's in the messaging that you send out through printed materials, and how you engage your students across a wide variety of difference, that trying to use your position as that accomplice to even make that shift a little bit from just being an ally that can opt in and out whenever it's convenient, to maybe kind of think about how can you be an accomplice, right? And bring some of those issues and concerns to the center, or center those voices that, you know, about students that don't get selected, right? You know, every year we have that at the university. We need orientation leaders, and they'll ask offices to nominate students, and invariably, you know, when it comes out, you're like, really, now we have the same mix of students again. So really being intentional about who we lift up and who we select, right, for leadership opportunities, or, you know, things like that within the school building, are also ways to kind of interrogate and interrupt some of that.
I think you're right, Laurie. You know, allies tend to deal with the current situation, and accomplices deal with the ongoing system. And so you want to get the structural issues that, you know, this situation may, you know, I live, you know, almost less than an hour from Louisville. So, you know, the whole Breonna Taylor thing is going on nonstop, and things like that, and here in Louisville. And so an ally will be out there in the streets dealing with that particular situation. But if you deal with the system, you know, you have less issues around like Breonna Taylor's and things of that nature. So that's an accomplice, you know, and an ally just, like she said, opts out, in and out, and things of that nature. And so as both are good, but to address microaggressions and micro messages. All right, so that's kind of like our formal presentation. Any comments, questions? I said I'm gonna get this PowerPoint to Sarah. I don't know if they post it somewhere or they send it to you all, how they do that, but it will get to you all. And we have some other resources, and so my email address is on there. So if you want some other information around the topics we talked about, or next week is going to be on culture responsive teaching, I have resources for that and things of that nature. Feel free to email me, or my cell's on there also. I always enjoy these conversations, like you all's interaction. So anything else for the good of the order while we're here? Questions, comments? I see a lot of chats.
I see a lot of thank yous. Thank you for joining us today and participating and engaging with us, and really making that commitment to either continue doing the things that are meaningful, to stop, you know, or to start doing some new things. So thank you for that.
And I see some of the same faces and names now. And so some of y'all been here like 3 or 4 times. I'm gonna recruit some of you all to do some of these sessions. You know, that's what we're gonna do, build capacity, right?
Absolutely, train the trainers.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And just to reiterate what Dr. Wright and Dr. Cleveland said, make sure to join us next week for our final Ag Ed for All webinar at 3 o'clock Eastern time. Right here, you can register on the NAA website if you're interested in joining us again. So we want to thank you so very much, Dr. Cleveland and Dr. Wright, for providing this opportunity for us. And we're looking forward to Dr. Gray next week as well. So thank you all very, very much.
All right. I'm putting my email address in it right now because there's a couple of questions that we can go do it personally. There's my email address. I think there's Matt that sent one.
Okay.
And a few other comments. Well, appreciate you all's y'all's time, and we'll see you all in the next round. All right.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you all again.